Hi, everyone. This is Lily,
This is Vidia,
and welcome to Girls
Grace,
and Giggles.
All right, welcome to episode 6, where we're getting deeper.
Deeper and deeper still.
Yes. So in this episode, we're going to talk about our faith.
Mhm.
And as our podcast name suggests, Girls, Grace, and Giggles, we are two girls living in God's grace, and we love giggles.
Yeah.
But Lily is like rolling her eyes.
I do not like this tagline, but we'll just go with it. It's a placeholder for now.
Yes, but yeah.
But it is true.
Mhm.
So credit where credit is due.
Yes. Yeah, we are living in God's grace, and it's a very important and significant part of our identity. And we would be happy to share our testimonies with you guys because it's all about God. It's not about us. Yeah. Why don't you start? Like, how did you become a Christian?
It all started once upon a time. No. So I think that my path to faith is probably similar to many immigrant families. So, like we mentioned in the earlier episodes, my family and I immigrated to Canada when I was fairly young. And at the time, in the late 90s, it was a very different Canada to what it is now. And so there weren't that many Asians, believe it or not, in Vancouver. I mean, still, it was a very Asian city, but I think my parents kind of struggled to find community. And one of the first people that reached out to them to help were Christians and were the church. And so I think that previously in China, it's very, and still is, a atheist country officially. And they were kind of very much taught and indoctrinated that, to be atheist. And so we kind of grew up in that kind of environment, myself included. But because, we were in a new place and far away from anything that was familiar, anytime people were showing kindness was very much appreciated. And so there was a group of people. I don't really know how they ended up getting connected to my parents, but perhaps it was like friends of friends or whatever else. At first, I think it was because they offered daycare services. And so when my parents had to go, like, trying to find a job, they had no one to take care of me. And so I think it was someone at church who had a daycare business in their home. And so they would send me there. And then my parents were also learning how to drive and get driving licenses. And so it was also like people at church who helped them with that.
Yeah.
And of course, at the time, we didn't have a car and we didn't have any means to carry groceries. So they would help us with like grocery runs and just like very practical assistance and very practical and timely help in a very like non-judgmental and non like trying to get something from you kind of way. And so I think my parents were very touched and were very confused because they were like, I have nothing to offer you in return, and like, why are you being so nice to me? Like, what are you trying to get at? What are you trying to get from me? Because I have nothing that I can offer you. And so they didn't ask or they didn't want anything. They just said, no, like, Jesus loves you, so we love you too, and this is what we do. And so I think that made my parents at least pique their curiosity about Christianity.
And they invited your parents to church, right?
And they did. And then at the time there was a group of people like my parents who were newcomers to Canada, and so they formed their own like fellowship group. And it was like a couple who was like pretty like older Christians and older like physically as well, to kind of take care of this new fellowship group that just started. And so and keep in mind my parents were in their like mid 30s at this point. So just like correction on the previous podcast when I said they were in their mid 40s. No, they were in their mid 30s. So I just couldn't do math because the former episode. But anyhow, so I think they started going to church, and then that's when I started going along with them. And that was kind of my first time at a church, and
So you were
I was like 6 or so
okay.
ish. Yeah, and I think I just went like for the games. I didn't really
Yeah, yeah.
absorb much of anything, but I just felt like it was a nice environment to play in, and that was it. And eventually, like my parents got baptized, both of them at that church, and then
Oh, how long after you guys arrived in Canada did
I
they
don't
get baptized?
remember.
Okay,
Yeah, that's kind of a
maybe not a
blur.
long time. I guess.
Probably in like a few years. Yeah,
Oh,
I really I
yeah,
can't
yeah.
remember. I do know that my dad got baptized first, and then my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was also during that time when I just moved back, like moved to Canada, that I had a lot of nightmares as a kid, like night terrors. I would dream of like very scary scenarios where I would be like in a box or like covered by snakes or like just a very graphic, scary dreams that no one could really explain. And then
Wow.
my parents were like, "Well, why don't you pray?"
Mm,
And that was kind of my first exposure to prayer. And so I was like, okay. And then I think I prayed once before bed. And then I didn't have scary dreams that night. I didn't have any
oh
nightmares. And I was
wow.
like, wow, this is great. I'm gonna just do this every night so I don't have nightmares. And so I ended up getting a habit of like praying every night before bed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that helped. I didn't have nightmares anymore. And so that was kind of my first foray into thinking like, oh, what is prayer? Like, what is God? What is this and
Mm-hmm.
that? I think I never doubted that there was a God, but I just didn't really see any connection that he would have with me aside from my requests for prayer, like
Okay.
for the nightmares to go away. And I think I life kind of progressed in that way, very much so. And then as I grew more and more into my faith, there was like many people that helped me along in that journey, of
Mm-hmm.
course. But I think I started reading my Bible because we later on went to another church where the youth leader there, he would have this summer competition where we would do Bible drills, like sword drills.
Mm.
So everyone would hold up their Bibles, and then he would say a
Yeah,
verse,
yeah.
and then whoever can
Find the
find the verse
verse.
the fastest and read it out loud would win a prize.
And you
And
won, right?
I did win, so I'm quite proud of this. So and there would be like a big competition, and I thought that this was sponsored by the church. No, he paid everything for himself. It was
Mm.
like just his act of love. And I feel really bad looking back because we were really disobedient kids. We were not attentive. We did not listen. We were just very rambunctious people. Just, tweens and teens and just not not good at all. And so looking back, I'm like, wow, you really did have like the patience of a godly man
Yeah, yeah.
to like, withstand us, and just a very loving heart. But they were really good prizes. So I remember the first year I won third place, and I got a camera, and it was like a digital camera at the
Wow.
time, and it was like a very
It's a
fancy.
fancy prize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the following year I won second place, and I got a laptop. Can you believe it? Yeah, it was
Wow.
crazy. And he paid for all of these prizes like with his own funds. And I remember because I was up against this girl, and we were like in the last kind of round, and I really, really wanted that laptop. And I was really nervous that she would pick the laptop because first place doesn't get the first prize, they get first pick at all the prizes. And so I was like, oh, for sure
Nice.
she's going to go for that laptop because that's like the best prize there is. But lucky for me, she won, but she actually didn't take the laptop. There was this $500 gift card for shopping at
Mm-hmm.
Richmond Center, like, and so she was pretty like she was really into shopping. So she took the gift card, and I was like, great! I don't care anything about the gift card. I just want the laptop. And so even though I came in second, like I still got the prize that I actually wanted. And
Yeah.
then like that laptop was in my family for like years, and I was like so pleased about it because obviously we couldn't afford a laptop just
Yeah,
for
yeah,
me.
yeah.
Like that's such a such a
Valuable
yeah, exactly. And
prize.
like I think at the time, like our whole family just had this one computer that we all shared.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I was like, wow, I get my own laptop. That is like unheard of. And so I was very pleased with, the fruits of my labor. But if you think that that was something that would incite me to read my Bible wrong, more, you would be sorely disappointed, because that was not it. So it was very much misguided in a way, because it did not lead me to read my Bible more. In fact, it was just kind of like, okay, let me just do this so I can get the prize. But
Mm-hmm.
regardless, whatever it was worth, it did make me more aware of Bible stories
Mm-hmm.
and more aware of this and that. But at the same time, I think that a lot of there was a dissonance between what we learned on Sunday versus like my life from
Mm.
Monday to Saturday.
In what way?
Yeah, like I felt like, church was church and then life was life.
Yeah, like they're separate.
Yeah, they're separate. Or I just felt like the people that I saw, like I didn't see them living or acting so much different
Mm.
in their everyday life than church. So I just kind of like was like, oh, I guess this is kind of fake. But then I was like, well, if everyone's doing it, maybe this is just like normal. Um, and life kind of carried on like that for a while. And like, we moved around a lot when I was a kid. And so I ended up going to many different types of churches.
Mm-hmm.
And
And you
then
always went as a family, right?
yeah, largely.
Mm-hmm.
There's a time where it was just my dad and
Yeah, yeah,
myself, but largely, yes, we went
yeah.
as a family. And then basically there was when we moved to another city, like we started actually serving at a church, and that was my first time kind of serving in the role, because
Mm-hmm.
literally there was no other people, so you were kind of forced to do it. It was me and two other people who were like around the same age, and so we were all like put together on like the worship team, the Bible study, like just Sunday school. Like we just had to, like, we were forced to do it because there was no one else. It was just adults and then kids and then us. These three teenagers, so we were stuck to, like, teach the kids and whatever. And so that kind of was a new step for me for service.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually through that time, I did get baptized. um
Oh, how old or how young were you?
um Good question. I think 16 or something.
Mm-hmm.
16, 17. No, 16, I think. 16. Um yeah, and I was definitely like, I think there was a bit of pressure for me to do it, because everyone was like, "Well, you're already, like, serving at the church, so you should do it." But um perhaps for me it was a little bit like, okay, I guess I should do this because
Yeah,
I'm in this role, but not perhaps because I really like felt like I ought to do it. Like, I don't know. It was kind of like a mixed kind of emotion.
yeah.
But to fast forward to eventually when I went to university, I think that's when my faith really became my own. So
Mm-hmm.
if ever there was a turning point, it would be that. Because the dissonance that I was talking about before, I think that grew a lot in first year of my university days, because for the first time I was kind of away from home, and away from everything that was familiar, away from my previous environment. And so I
Comfort zone.
exactly. So for the first time in my life, I realized, like, whatever habits and whatever thoughts that I carried on, those were the things that I actually believed and held on to. And not because of my outside environment, not because of societal pressure, not because of my parents' instruction, not because of their habits, but
Mm-hmm.
like whatever I had remaining, that was actually my own. And I felt myself um, kind of questioning like what I actually believed, and
Yeah.
going through that kind of self realization, self actualization process. And so I found going to church difficult. I found without community, going to church lost a lot of my motivation. And then it made me reflect, like, okay, then why did I go to church
Yeah,
before?
yeah,
Was it really for God, or was it just because it was familiar?
yeah.
because my parents went, so I had
I
to.
feel like yours is not a unique experience.
No,
A
I
lot
think
of
this is very much cookie
right
cutter.
for children who grew up in a Christian household and then they left
Yes,
home for university, then they
yes,
started
I
questioning.
am very much the textbook of that,
Mm,
textbook example of this. And so I think that what really set me apart was because I really um, started questioning these things. And so in first year, I perhaps naively, boldly, and foolishly thought that I didn't need to go to church and that I could just read the Bible on my own, and
mm-hmm.
then, I can still be a Christian just by myself. Um, that is wrong. And I soon learned about why that was so wrong, because um, when you're on your own, you fall very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And without that structure and that support, like, church really is a grace that God has given to
Mm,
us. Um, because He knows that, you know, like, together we are stronger. Um, so, because of my deciding that church was unimportant, or that it was unnecessary for me to go, I started then thinking, like, okay, whatever, I'll just read my Bible on my own. And then slowly I started not reading my Bible. And then slowly, like, there was a lot of things because I lived on dorm in first year, and there was a lot of like parties and people going clubbing and all these like different experiences that I've never experienced before. And so I was like, wow, let's see how the other side lives. And so yeah, so that's what I did briefly. And so I had yeah a moment of kind of experiencing what that life would be like, and realized pretty quickly that it was very vapid and very boring.
oh, okay. You didn't
Pretty
enjoy it?
no, I don't think so.
Okay.
I feel like what I enjoyed, like, there was one time that I thought, oh, this was a good time. This was a fun time. Every other time, it was not that enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel like people, maybe it's like a mob mentality where, like, people assume you're supposed to have fun. So they kind of force themselves to have fun, but in fact, no one is having fun.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, you see a lot of things where, like, oh, you have to be inebriated, or you have to be on some sort of other stimulation of some kind
Mm-hmm.
to actually let loose and have fun. And you realize, like, oh, many people are just using that as a crutch. They're not actually enjoying themselves. Or if they get lost in that, maybe there's something deeper in them that's actually lost. That it's
Mm-hmm.
just an outward expression of their um, inner loss, or like feeling
Yeah.
of emptiness of some kind. But not to say those things in and of themselves are bad. Like, dancing is not bad, drinking perhaps is
Mm-hmm.
not bad either. Like, it's just the way that it's done. It leads to things that you know are
Yeah, and the
quite
motivation
dangerous.
in doing those things.
Exactly. And if you're searching for something to be fulfilled in that, it's an empty road,
Yeah.
which is yeah, it's something I think pretty sad sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, anyway, so I won't get too much into that. But I think that the turning point came for me in second year, where I encountered a fellowship in university. We were there at the
Mm-hmm.
same time. That's where we met. So this is the genesis of how Vidia and I met, basically.
Yeah.
The origin story, the prelude.
Yeah. So that was your first year of attending this fellowship, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think what surprised me at first is that I actually observed Christians who were my age, who were like legit, for lack of a better word. And that dissonance that I was talking about before, it didn't really exist with them. And I was so shocked. It really blew my mind, in the sense I was like, wow, they actually are Christian, like, not just on Sundays, but like in
Yeah.
their
Living
life.
out their faith.
And I think that was just so revolutionary to me. I don't think I've actually seen that in people my age. And I want to emphasize the people my age bit because, like, in my upbringing, of course, I've seen people that I thought were, quote unquote, legit Christians or like serious Christians, but they were all, older than me, or like people who are like in a pastoral kind of,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
vocation, like that was their job, or like youth leaders or people who were in some sort of leadership position.
Yeah.
So I didn't see people who my peers or whom I considered my peers to also be like super legit, like ultra Christian. And so my conception was like, oh, maybe this whole Christianity thing is just something you grow into.
Mm-hmm.
As you age, you just become more
Yeah.
Christian.
Yeah.
And so I had this misconception that it was not, it was just like maybe time was
Yeah.
the reason behind,
It's a later thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And because my previous, examples were all older. So it really did come as a shock to me when I saw people my age who I thought were really living out the faith, and living out the faith being like very minor things, like they would pray before meals, they would
Mm.
they would pray just in all
Yeah.
circumstances, they
Yeah.
would um
Do worship nights
yeah, they would
outside of
do,
Sundays.
yes, like they would live in a way that that would show their faith, and not just in like the, prayer and like
Yeah.
worship
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever, but like in like, oh, I feel compelled to like tell you something about this or whatever, or like
Mm.
I want to show love to this person, or I
Yeah.
want to give of myself, and like, like spend time with people that perhaps we would normally neglect or whatever,
Mm. Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
just in those ways that I'm like, wow, you actually live out your faith. And so just from observation, I distinctly remember that there was a passage, like a verse that came to mind. And this is like a very novel experience because previous to this, my Bible reading extended just to the, the competition and like reading about, just to get the prizes. And sure, like I read the Gospels and I read like definitely read the New Testament and bits of the Old Testament, but my Bible knowledge was very limited, be that as it may. But as I was kind of observing this group of people, Matthew 5 kind of came into mind. And it was like, and they will see your good works and praise your Father in heaven. And
Mm.
that verse was so evident. And so it just came as like just very, very clear to me. And I was like, wow, that's actually true. Because I see these people and I can't explain their actions aside from them really loving God.
Mm.
And that really made me curious for the first time in my life to actually read the Bible for myself.
Yeah.
And not because I was forced to, not because I would gain a prize of some kind,
Yeah.
not because I had to study and prepare for Sunday school or whatever, because I had to teach
Yeah.
Sunday
Yeah.
school,
Yeah.
but just purely for me to understand and learn more about God. And because I think I had the right attitude and I had the right um, motivation and intention, um, like I think God's word just really opened up to me.
Mm.
And we were studying, I remember we were studying the book of John. And after John, we studied Acts. And then after Acts, like, I was like, well, I might as well just keep reading. So then I read from Acts all the way to Revelation, and I was like, well, I might as well start from the beginning.
Yeah.
So then I read from Matthew to Luke, and so I finished the New Testament. And I was like, well, then I might as well start from the very
The
beginning.
Old Testament.
Yeah, and so I did. And then I read from Genesis to Malachi. And then, I mean, this, don't get me wrong, this took me a while. It's not like a overnight thing. I think it took me about 2 years to read the full Bible. But I just, through that time and through God's kind of leading, he really became alive to me. And that's when I really
Mm.
feel like, wow, I know you and you know me. And
Yeah.
like we are known to each other. And it's a beautiful thing. And ever since then, I think I was previously really struggling with, the more I read, the more conflicted I became, because I kept on seeing that dissonance that I was talking about
Yeah.
grow. And it was just gnawing at me. It was like making me feel like, oh, it can't be. Like, I can't like fall in love in with God more and more and still act the way I am. Like, it's not aligned. It's not in simpatico. So I think ultimately, I think I came to a point where, we were reading Romans 12 about how, we have to lay ourselves down as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. And this is our spiritual act of worship.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, wow, we're giving fully of ourselves. And I think that's such a vulnerable thing to do. And I really struggled with that because I was like,
Yeah.
sure, like, yeah, and I say I dedicate my life to God, and like He's my Lord and Savior, this and that. But to really rest in that and think about what that means and what that implies, it's like, if you make God the Lord of your life, then He comes first before everything.
Everything.
And you need
Everything and
to
everyone.
actually live your life in a way that you you put yourself as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. And I really struggle with that a lot because I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't want to do that. That's asking a lot, And whenever I thought like that, I'm like, oh, why am I so selfish? Why am I so like, you know, hesitant and reluctant to give fully of myself? Even though I fully know, like, the more and more I know of like God's sacrifice for me, and Christ died on the cross for me and for my sins and this and that, and I'm like, oh, like, faced with such grand sacrifice, like, how come I can't reciprocate in that way? And I still feel like this selfish desire to hold on to
Mm-hmm.
the ownership of my life. And I think it's a very human thing to
Yeah.
feel, and
Yeah.
it's a very tempting thing to feel. And the way I kind of was released from that, or kind of um, was able to see it from a different perspective, is um, I attended this retreat. And retreats are a great thing to do, by the way, if you ever get to go. Yeah, they're pretty transformative. And so I attended this one retreat, and I remember somehow after that retreat, the way I thought about this whole like self-sacrifice completely changed. And I kind of realized that if I really recognize God as the creator of my life and the author of my life, then He actually created my life. And if I am His creation, then I'm actually His.
Mm.
So it's not so much as me like offering up myself to Him, but rather just like returning to Him what was originally His to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And that really kind of changed my whole thinking about, oh, what a burden, or what a grand sacrifice. Look at me, what I'm making to God or whatever. And it sounds so petty now, but I did struggle with this a lot, and for many years. And but if you think about it, like, you're just returning to someone something that was theirs to begin with.
It's not yours
Yeah,
to
it's
begin
like it
with.
wasn't
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the ownership idea really kind of shifted for me. And that's what made me, it kind of unlocked something. I was like, oh, okay, then that makes sense. And so I think from that point onward, it was like a different perspective of how to look at things. And bit by bit, I think I really like opened up myself a lot more to
Mm-hmm.
God. And He showed me more and more things that I was continuously wowed by, to the point where I'm like, okay, I can't deny this any
Yeah.
longer.
Yeah.
Like, I just have to be with you. Like, I just
Yeah.
have to,
Submit.
yeah, I just
Yeah.
have to submit. And it wasn't like a huge like um chore or like a difficult thing. It was like, when you get to that stage, you're like, oh, yeah.
It would be a fool for you not to do
Yeah,
that.
and it's like, this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is like the logical and like proper thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you do it, there's this burden that's released, but it's also like, oh, now everything fits. like, oh, finally I am aligned. I'm like properly placed in my
Mm-hmm.
life. I'm properly placed in my my relationship with others, and everything just now finally fits. And
Mm-hmm.
now I have kind of a centered purpose for being.
Yeah.
And I think that really comforted me a lot. And so now I find that the the tests and the challenges get harder and harder. They don't get easier, folks. I mean, at least in my experience, is like now, okay, now the troubles really begin.
And they'll continue till
Yeah,
the end of our lives.
exactly.
Um,
But I think that it just set forth this journey that I'm so um, glad to be on. And so I feel like um,
yeah.
that was kind of my, I mean, this is long story long at this point, but I think that my story is very similar to many people's stories
Uh-huh.
about like growing up in the church. But I was very thankful that I encountered a fellowship in university that really um,
Transform your life.
transformed me and changed me to challenge my own thinking and to challenge my own presuppositions about being a Christian. And I think sometimes moments are like experiences are just for that moment, you know, like that moment in time, and it can't really be replicated again. But
Mm-hmm.
like, man, am I ever
Yeah.
grateful for that moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the impact is long lasting and it was so significant.
Yeah, and then now it's like, oh, there's new challenges ahead and different things to encounter, but now I feel like I'm on the path,
Mm-hmm.
and that is very reassuring.
Yeah.
So, you know, step by step, as they
Yeah.
say.
And there's
Yeah.
been growth, right? Like
Yeah,
in your
I think there's been
story. And
growth.
you are still growing. So
Yeah, yeah. Let's hope so.
yeah.
Let's hope
You
so.
must.
Um, I mean, there's also been like stagnation. There's
Yeah.
also been retrogression.
Yeah, we go
but
through that.
but like generally, hopefully, it's been progress
Mm-hmm.
forward.
Sometimes progress is not linear, right?
Linear, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's also a good thing
Mm-hmm.
to keep in mind. And I mean, I'm something. I mean, I'm obviously human and struggle with temptation, struggle with sin, struggle with all of these things that um, that I guess we all do. But it's kind of I still want to pursue this path. I still want to
Mm-hmm.
carry on. I still want to keep going. And I think so long as we keep going, we will get there.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Because
it's
we
a
are not
matter,
alone.
yeah, yeah. It's just a matter of keep going. You know, keep
Mm-hmm,
going.
mm-hmm.
Don't stop. Keep going. So
Don't stop
believe
believing.
it. Exactly, exactly. So anyhow, I think that's basically it for me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's kind of how we met. So obviously, I'm also grateful for that
Yes.
that experience to
Mm-hmm.
connect us. And then, like our friendship has outlasted the
Many things.
the campus fellowship as well. So it's just it's been a wild ride, folks. A
Yeah.
wild ride. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, what about you?
Yeah.
Please do share.
Yeah, so I didn't grow up in a Christian household.
Mm,
My dad is Buddhist.
mm,
My mom is either agnostic or atheist. I'm not sure.
mm,
So we as in me and my two sisters were raised Buddhist. We
mm.
went to a Buddhist school. For
What
me,
is a
I
Buddhist school?
so the religion lesson in our school would be Buddhism.
But like monks don't teach you or something.
Yeah, they did.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, and then we
wow.
would have to go to temples, like every
Oh,
week, or like every
wait, but can the monk be a teacher at the
yeah,
same time?
yeah,
Oh, really?
yeah. I was
Oh,
taught by one of them,
oh, wow.
for a few years. So
Like, what did they teach you? Was it like regular school subjects or
yeah,
was it?
yeah, it
Oh,
was
okay.
like math
Oh,
or like
wow. A
biology, but then we
Buddhist
would talk about.
monk math teacher. How about that?
Oh, sorry, and so the monks would just teach the religion
Oh,
lesson.
oh,
So
okay, okay.
Buddhism.
Okay, but then you had a math teacher, like you're like a separate piece.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that it's just like any other lesson. Like it will be like a
Oh, okay, okay.
yeah, it will be like a religion class.
Ah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
see, I
yeah,
see.
yeah.
Okay.
Um, yeah, because schools in Indonesia would have like religions attached to them. So yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
And even on your ID card, right, you have to declare
exactly.
your
Yeah,
religion.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think these days, I'm not too sure because I don't have kids. I think
Mm-hmm.
these days, some schools would have different religions for the students to choose from. But
Mm.
yeah.
But can you not declare, or you have to declare one?
I'm not sure.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I went to a Buddhist school, was raised Buddhist, until my older sister became Christian when she was maybe like 15. So
Mm-hmm.
a young teenager, and then she
Mm.
started sharing the gospel with me.
Mm.
Um, I was maybe like 11
Mm.
or 12, and I just thought everything made sense. Like, hey,
Wow,
yeah, it
really?
was really that easy because in
Wow.
Buddhism you don't really have a savior, so it's
Mm.
kind of like everything is on your own.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um
And then you, like, through your own meditation, try to achieve nirvana.
yeah, yeah. And then
Mm.
for me to hear how in Christianity you have a savior, you pray
Mm.
to this God, and I'm like, yeah, sign me up. Like, I
Really?
want a savior. Yeah,
Wow.
it was really that easy.
Mm.
So I became Christian on grade six. Maybe I was 12 or so.
Wow.
Um, but I
But you were still going to the Buddhist school?
yes, so I went to that Buddhist school from kindergarten all the way to high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
That's a
I
big
just
school.
yeah, it's not a big school.
But it
Um,
covers like all the grades?
yes,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah. So
Okay.
I graduated
Wow.
from that one school. And yeah, I received some backlash from school. And my dad was not happy that
Mm.
not one but two of his daughters,
Mm.
became Christian, and he was like one of the elders
Of the school?
of the temple, which is part of the school. So
Oh, okay. So must have made things a bit awkward for
yeah, it
him.
was like
Like a political thing.
I don't know, like I think he was like ashamed.
Mm.
I don't know. This is my own words. I don't know if he was
Right.
ashamed, but I think yeah, it was not something that he was proud of.
Right. It probably
Um,
caused him some trouble with the school as
oh,
well. To be like,
I
but how did they know that you were Christian? Did you start doing things that were
I
different?
think yeah, I stopped going to the
Ah,
temple.
okay.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe he told the teachers or the leaders at the temple as well.
Right.
But the people. So yeah, the teachers and the leaders of the temple or the school knew that I was not a Buddhist anymore. So I yeah, got some
Did they treat you
backlash.
differently or something?
Yeah, so I would be called into like the teacher's room after school or in the middle of school, and they would like ask me why, like why did you become a
Oh,
Christian? Did you know
wow.
that your dad, is a leader in this temple? And I think they started to like um,
Pressure
knock some
you?
sense into me, like like Christianity is wrong or whatever.
Oh.
Yeah, and that lasted for like a couple of years.
A couple years?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
So they would just constantly call you in and ask you to like defend yourself, kind of?
yeah, kind of. Yeah,
Wow.
and then I remember being called into the principal's office as well when I was in high school, and it was so funny
Wow.
because he was a Catholic. So in my mind, I'm like, what?
But he was the principal of the Buddhist
Yeah,
school?
yeah.
What?
I don't know.
Okay.
Anyways,
Were there other Christians in the school?
not that I know of. If there
You were just
was,
by yourself?
yeah, if there was,
Wow.
maybe there was just like one or two other people.
Did you feel lonely?
So here's the thing. When I became Christian, my older sister and I went to this church.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in hindsight, I realized that I think the church was like sharing prosperity gospel.
Oh,
But you know what? God works mysteriously
yeah.
in wonders, and I think going to that church really just built my passion and like fire for God. So
Sure. Yeah.
even though like my dad and my older sister had disagreements and arguments
Mm.
about us becoming Christians and me having that struggles at school, I was like, no, I will stay Christian. Yeah, I
Wow.
was like so
On
just
fire.
on fire for God. I was like,
Wow.
I will not, like,
Back down.
yeah, I will not renounce my faith. I am now a Christian
Wow.
and I'm proud of it.
Wow. Good for
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
That
So
seems like a lot of pressure. Like if the school was saying like, asking you to defend yourself, and then your dad was like upset with you,
Yeah.
and like,
So my
you
dad was more
know,
upset with my sister actually. Maybe because I was like younger,
younger. Oh, okay.
and maybe he was like blaming more of my sister and not me.
Oh, to say like you influenced your
Kind
younger
of,
sister
yeah,
to
yeah,
convert as well.
yeah.
Okay, I see.
But again, there was still like tension at the house, right?
Yes, of
So,
course.
but yeah, I think I don't remember being super stressed. I mean, there were
Wow.
times when it was like, oh my gosh, like there's this like arguments between my sister and my dad,
Right.
but
But
I
it
think,
carried on for years, you said.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Internally, I think I still felt that I was peaceful with, being a
Your decision?
Christian.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it was yeah, it was God.
So, like, did you go to, like, did you make friends at church that you could kind of
No,
rely?
so
No.
so
Okay.
my early years of becoming of being a Christian, I was kind of like a lone wolf. Didn't really have a
Really?
community. I was
Oh,
just a
no.
church goer. It was just me and my sister going to church. After church, we would just go back home.
So there was no, like, how big was this church
Oh,
that
it
you
was a
went
mega
to?
church. Yeah,
Oh,
so
okay. Okay. So it's like
yeah,
harder to make community and stuff.
yeah, I did like serve here and there, but not for like long term.
Mm.
And also
And
like
you were a kid, were you
yeah,
not? Yeah.
yeah, and like my dad wasn't very happy that we were going to church
Right.
either. So yeah, just going to church was like enough for me. At least that's
Right.
what I thought. Because with all the arguments and backlash, I was like,
Mm.
yeah, step by step.
Right. But like Buddhists don't have like a weekly gathering
They
day.
do, they
Oh, they
do.
do?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
day?
Huh?
What day do they gather?
Sunday.
Oh, they also
Yeah,
gather
yeah,
Sunday
yeah.
to go to like the temple?
Yep.
Oh, oh, I
Yeah,
didn't know that. Okay.
yeah. So I stopped going to the temple because I was going to church, right?
Right.
So
Okay.
yeah,
Oh.
yeah. So early years of becoming a Christian, I was just like a churchgoer. I didn't understand the necessity of being in a community.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and I think like I was doing well at school in terms of like my
Mm.
academic performance. So I think
Right.
maybe that was like a good testimony as well, like for other people, because even
Mm.
though people were like, "Why did you become?" or people as in like the leaders,
Mm.
they were like, "Why did you become a Christian?" But
Mm.
I hope they realized that I was not going on the wrong path.
Mm. You're
Like,
like Joseph,
oh, okay.
right? Kind of like showing his excellence.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah, carry
Yeah,
on.
yeah. And I hope my dad also saw that me and my sister were becoming good kids as well.
Mm. Mm.
And I still remember this moment when I was gonna turn 17, which
Mm.
is like the year in Indonesia when you are considered like an official adult, because then you will get your own ID card where you have to
Oh,
state what your religion is.
right.
So
Wow.
my dad took me out to this donut place.
Okay.
Um, like randomly, we don't do that. We
Okay.
just like stay at
Okay.
home usually. But
Right.
he took me out to this donut place and like had a conversation with me about my religion. He was like,
Wow.
now that you are gonna be an adult officially,
Mm.
yeah, I want to give that choice to you.
Wow.
Yeah, to state whatever religion you want in your ID
Wow.
card. And
That shows a lot of maturity and like,
I was very touched, and I think God really like softened his heart. And
mm.
I'm very thankful for that. I mean, at that time, I was like, yes, finally, freedom. But
Right.
in hindsight, after a few years, looking back, I'm like, wow, God really just
Worked
like
a
worked
lot.
in him.
Yeah.
Um,
Because it must have taken him a lot to say that,
yeah.
especially because he was already like one of the leader people in the temple.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So I was very thankful, and slowly, the arguments between him and my sister, disappeared.
faded.
Yeah,
Mm.
faded. Didn't happen anymore. And again, I think
Maybe he was like, this is a lost cause. I will give up on
like
this.
I'll let go.
Right.
But yeah, hopefully he did see that we were becoming good people.
Mm, 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 mm.
So yeah, that was like my few years, early years of
Mm.
becoming
Were
Christian.
you like doing any Bible reading if you like didn't have community? Or is it just
Yeah,
like
not
listening to the
really. Not
sermons
really. It
and
was
stuff?
mostly going to church,
Mm.
trying to learn from sermons. Um,
Wow, then I'm really impressed that you were able to like withstand the pressures of the school and your dad and like like everybody else kind of
Yeah.
questioning
I have
you,
to say the sermons in the church were very, very like
passionate.
motivational.
Oh, so you're like, no, I will not renounce. I
Hmm.
am. Wow,
Yeah, that was me.
good for you. Wow,
Yeah,
that's really impressive. I mean, I think that's really impressive because
it
you
was
were
all
you were
God.
just a kid.
I
You know,
know,
you were
but maybe
just
because I was
a
a kid, I
weak
was
child.
fearless.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Like I was like, nope. Like this is my belief now. You don't get to change my
Good for
belief.
you.
Um, yeah, and then I got baptized when I was 16.
Hey, same
Yeah, same.
here.
So I was in high school, and
mm,
then I attended university in Taiwan.
mm,
Didn't really go to church. I mean, I
mm,
did for like the first year of university, but my view of going to church was very different back then. It was
mm,
wrong. So I had like a consumer perspective.
mm.
I was like, I didn't.
Like shopping around.
No, I just didn't like the worship. I was like,
Okay.
this is boring. This is just like all hymns. Like I'm not entertained.
Boring.
Because the previous
Right.
church or the first
Like had
church
a
I went
band or
to, yeah,
something.
it was like a concert. It was like like
Oh.
excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
You're like, oh, what is these hymns?
Yeah. So I was like, no,
Oh, okay.
I'm not entertained. This is not like up to my standard. So bad. So
Yeah, we've
yeah,
all
I'm
had those. Like, yeah,
yeah,
no, no, it's Lord forgive us.
I know. I went to church for like a year, and then like for the rest of my 3 years in Taiwan, I didn't really go to church. I went like occasionally.
Right. Did you
Yeah.
find like people at church that were like same age, or was it like a older church, kind of with older people,
Um,
or like how'd you find that place? Was it kind of just
there was a church that my friend invited me to that had a lot of young people, but I just didn't feel like I clicked.
right,
And
right?
so I was like, nah.
Nah, not the right
Yeah, which
vibe.
to this day I still regret because I
mm,
feel like I missed out on
mm,
having that community life in a Taiwanese church.
mm.
So yeah, if I could turn back time, I would still go, but you know.
We can only move forward.
Exactly.
Right.
So at that time, my 4 years in Taiwan, I was just listening to sermons online.
Mm.
I was listening to a lot of Francis Chan
Oh yeah,
sermons,
yeah. We
which
all
was actually very, very good.
had that. Talk about enthusiasm. This man is like
Yeah,
very much
yeah,
enthusiastic.
yeah. Really encouraged me in like living radically
Mm-mm.
and like living out my faith.
Mm.
And then I went to Canada for the first time as an exchange student, where I met you, and
Yay!
I came across this campus fellowship, and I
Yep.
was like, wow, people are so different here. They are like,
Mm.
as you said, like legit Christians. Not to say
Mm.
that people I met before were not legit, but I
Mm.
don't know. I just clicked.
Yep.
That is the turning point in my
Mm.
spiritual life.
Wow. So same for us.
Yeah, yeah. That's when I realized, oh, I have to live in a community because otherwise, how would you
Mm.
practice love? You can't just like love yourself.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
and it was just so eye-opening to see how people, as you said, were really like living out their faith.
Mm.
It was so fun to like serve
Yeah.
as a community,
Yeah.
and I was like,
Yeah.
wow, it's really fun to like be with other fellow Christians.
Mm.
Um,
And I think together we're like more bold.
mhm.
Like if it's just one person, it's like much harder. But strength in numbers, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
I remember we would like go out and like pray for people on campus. We would just
yeah,
like walk around in two by two and just like, you know, especially during exam season, just walk around and say,
yeah,
hey, can we just pray for
yeah,
you? And then basically people were always like very receptive to that. They would
yeah.
just, yeah,
Yeah,
be
so that was a
very
very
open.
transformative year for me as well. And I think
Mm,
prior to that, maybe I had like a wrong picture of my life would be. So I would think my
mm.
life would be like picture perfect because I was a Christian.
Ah,
Um,
that all your troubles would go away
yeah, and
or
that like I
something.
would eventually, like marry a good husband, and then like
That's
my
still possible.
yes, yes, but like I would have that like as a life goal, and I would,
mm.
yeah, it was just like,
Like you wanted kind of the picture perfect cookie cutter kind
yeah,
of.
like because I'm a Christian, then I would have this picture perfect life.
Mm.
But where is God
Yeah.
in that picture?
You know what's so funny is like I mean I listened to this one of my favorite pastors is called David Pawson. He's this like lovely older British gentleman
Mhm.
who
Who is no
has
longer with
yeah
us,
who has since
unfortunately.
passed
But
and
fortunately for him, he's with Jesus
yeah he
now.
has gone with the Lord. actually on Ascension Day. So I'm like,
Wow.
wow, how appropriate is this? Um, I think he died during COVID, so like around 2020. Anyhow, that's besides the point. But during one of his sermons, he mentioned how, it kind of bothers him when people give testimonies, because usually their testimonies go like, I was I had all these issues, and then I met the Lord, and then all my issues went away. He's like, I'm the exact opposite. I was living a perfectly fine life, and then I became a Christian, and all my troubles began. And I'm like, yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
pretty much the same for me too. Like, you encounter so many things in your life that perhaps because you're going against the current, you otherwise wouldn't encounter,
Yeah.
or principles that you would need to stand on that the rest of the world just simply dismisses, or just even mocks you for
Yeah.
standing on those principles, and so, or actually is diametrically opposed to the
Yeah. Yeah.
principles that you stand on. So I think it's not an easy life at times. I mean, of course, we're still living in Canada, so it's a very privileged life already. But there's many more Christians who are facing daily
Yeah.
persecutions and
Yeah.
things. But I think that once you make that decision, the way you live your life is completely different,
Yeah.
because you've made that decision to like follow Jesus.
Hmm.
So um, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a turning point, if anything.
Yeah. Just a side note, as you mentioned, persecution. I think
Mm,
back to my experience, like when I had that backlash from the school. I
mm,
think sometimes when you are under pressure, your faith actually grows. But when
mm,
you're
mm,
living like a
mm.
very comfortable life, then
Yeah,
you may be complacent. So
yeah,
maybe that
very
was one
true.
of the reasons as well.
Well, I think it forces you to really think about what you value. And then in that
Hmm.
pressure kind of situation, you're like, this is, a true test of my character, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyways, that 1 year in Ottawa,
Mm,
like that campus fellowship life, really
mm,
changed my life and my spiritual life. So
mm,
since then, I've always, whenever like I get into like a new church, I would try to get plugged into the community. I would try to serve
You
as
do. You
well.
try to really make an effort.
Yeah.
I can attest to that.
But yeah, living in community is so much more fun than living
Mm,
on your own. And as you said,
mm,
you are weak on your own.
mm.
Like you will still fall even though like you're living in community, then let alone when you're
Yeah,
just
by
by
yourself.
yourself.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah, that's kind of my story.
But then after you like move back to Indonesia, like after you, finish your year in Ottawa, like what happened after?
Oh, I just seek like a new church
Oh,
for
okay.
myself. Yeah,
Okay. All right.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's different. I think you really yeah, we can't overemphasize the need for community.
yeah.
Mm,
And how like other people's lives were testimonies for us, right? They
mm,
made us
yeah,
think. They
exactly.
made us like reflect and question.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think regardless of how, well, yes, it's a twofold thing too, right?
yeah.
Because like I said before, there's progression, and there's also retrogression and regression as well. And so um like, and I think I see that in, in myself. I see that in others around me as well. And so it's hard sometimes to see people perhaps that were in their uni days like really passionate and on fire for God, and now perhaps that passion has
Mm,
waned and like dimmed, and I'm including myself in this as well. And so um but I think that, like I said before, the important thing is that we keep going,
yeah.
despite
Run the
everything.
race.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And like, this is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. So you got to pace yourself,
Yeah. Yeah.
Who knows what like obstacles come up your way, and um things that you would encounter that you don't even know would happen, right?
Hmm.
We don't know what things life will throw at us, but I think so long as we're on the path, then we're on the right track.
Yeah. I also find it interesting that we both became Christians as kids because I think I've
Mm,
met a lot more people who became Christian or just really understood what it means to commit your life to Christ in university. Although,
I mean,
yes,
doesn't that happen for both of us?
yes, I mean the turning point is in university, but when we
Yes.
like
The seeds were planted in the youth. Yeah.
mhm.
Well, I find that perhaps it's because not necessarily university, but just during that time in your life, you're starting to actually,
have independence.
yeah, have
Yeah.
independence, actualize yourself,
Yeah.
really reflect on what it is that you believe versus what was imposed upon you
Yeah, that's
by
true.
your childhood, by your upbringing, by your family, by your environment.
And it can go the other way as well, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
And so, and what I find interesting is that, I mean, I turned out to be someone who, like, through fellowship, like, their faith has grown and, like, really kind of became my own thing. But there's many examples of people who, you know, had that faith kind of perhaps imposed on them in their youth, and then as soon as they had some form of independence,
Yeah, autonomy.
yeah, just very quickly and swiftly left the church. And that happens in many more cases than
Yeah,
it does
yeah.
For people like me who like had their own faith strengthened.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the statistic is quite stark. Actually, I heard something like 90%, which is ridiculous.
Wow. Okay.
In terms of the fallout from the church. So I mean, that's a whole other topic on its own about like why the youth are so leaving in droves. But I think now there's perhaps a resurgence of people seeking meaning, seeking deeper things in their life, and religion is really an attractive thing that people are looking at. But just they're using different terms. They're saying things like, they're using like meditation, or they're using like wellness and self-care and this and that. And I think what they're trying to seek is like this sense of peace. They're trying to seek like sense of purpose, a sense of belonging,
Connection.
connection, something deeper. But at least for myself, it's like all of those things sound like very flowery, light, frilly terms. But, and you can get some semblance of that through like practices of like, good regimens, like good diet, good exercise, good healthcare, whatever. But you can't really get that deeper thing unless you are spiritually and intellectually stimulated. And like with Christianity, the most beautiful thing of all is that this faith is a relationship with a person, and that person is Jesus.
Yeah.
And so it's not words on a page, it's like an actual relationship. And I find that that's so much more inviting and so much more concrete than just like, oh yeah, like practice meditation and like do these like yoga poses and then you will find peace for your soul. It's like, well, or you can get to know like the word made flesh and like that will open up your life to have meaning and purpose.
And that's what makes Christianity stand out from other faiths as well. It's a relationship. And it's also not about works. So there is nothing that you can do to like
Yeah, you can't earn it. Because none of us deserve it to begin with. So like grace is
but yet you have that
given
certainty of grace.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, I always love listening to like how people became Christians. So whenever I get to know like new friends who are Christians, I would like to know their story.
Yeah, it's the whole gospel friendship thing. Yeah. So Vidia and I went on this other retreat recently. So retreats are good, and the theme of the retreat, quite, I think, unexpectedly, I've never had a retreat have this
Focus
as
on
the
friendships.
topic. It was on gospel friendships, which I, to this day, perhaps I'm still a bit confused on, because I'm like, how is that different from just fellowship? But I think the idea is that, whatever relationship you have with Christians, it can just be a regular friendship unless you bring like Jesus into the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think what you were saying earlier about like just sharing testimonies, sharing about what you're struggling with or how God has been leading you in your life recently, that's really making the friendship more gospel
Mm-hmm.
centered, right? And not just like, oh, you know,
Just do fun things
yeah,
together.
yeah, just do fun things together,
Yeah.
which is also fun,
Yes.
but maybe that's not really fellowship. That maybe
Yeah.
that's not really like gospel centered. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I think you need both like in our friendship, but if you make it gospel centered, you will have a richer experience and
Mm-hmm.
a deeper connection.
Yeah. Because then you're united through Christ, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
And it's encouraging to like lift each other up. And I mean, this road is long and this road is hard. And if you don't
Mm-hmm.
have a companion, then, it's going to feel even longer and harder.
Yeah. So let's run the race together.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds good.
So yeah, that's our stories. I guess it's appropriate
Yeah.
for Christmas,
Yeah. I mean,
right?
it's still in progress, like works in
Oh
progress
yeah,
we
for
have.
sure.
So
Until
until kingdom
yeah,
come, I don't
yeah.
know, or until we die, whichever comes
And we
first.
face Jesus.
Yeah,
So
but yeah, I think this is, yeah, like you said, appropriate for Advent, appropriate for Christmas
yeah.
season. Share the gospel with your friends, and
Yeah, we'd
yeah,
love to hear your stories as well. So
yeah, that'd be great.
yeah.
Okay,
All right. Thanks guys for listening. See you at the next one. Bye.
bye.